Hi, I'm Phil Baty. I am the Chief Knowledge Officer at Times Higher Education. I've been with Times Higher Education for 25 years. I was the editor of the World University Rankings for a decade. So I advise on the strategy around our rankings, our analysis and interpretation of our rankings, as well as looking after our international events business. The Times Higher Education Impact Rankings are absolutely unique in global rankings. They are the only rankings out there that measure a university's social and economic impact. So we take the Sustainable Development Goals as our framework. We think that's the perfect methodology to understand all the different ways that universities have an impact on the world, through equalities, through driving our response to global heating, taking climate action, through creating the conditions for economic growth and decent work, right through to the environment. So it's a really broad, multifaceted framework that allow us to really capture all the multifaceted ways that universities make a difference to the world, hopefully make a positive impact on making the world a better place. So it's an absolutely unique framework, something we're incredibly proud of. Yeah, so we're actually using the SDGs as the guiding framework for judging universities. So we actually rank each university on all 17 of the SDGs. So universities can literally choose to take part in all of the SDGs or just one or two. So there are 17 rankings for 17 different SDGs. So each university's contribution to each one of the SDGs, and then we create an overall ranking. So the SDGs are absolutely at the heart of this ranking. They are the guiding principle, they are the framework of measurement and benchmarks that we use. So we look at universities' impact on the world in four core areas. We call them sort of four theories of change, where universities are able to nudge us forward and push towards delivering the SDG. So we look at these four areas. First of all, research. Of course, universities are creating new knowledge. They're developing the new technologies that might help us, move towards our climate goals, for example, reducing carbon. We look at research that they do in economics around, driving forward the economy, tackling global inequalities. Areas like food security, for example, where we have the SDG on zero hunger. So the research they're doing into agriculture and literally the science of food production. So we look at their new knowledge creation, and we have a bibliometric database we draw on that allows us to extract research papers that are directly relating to each of the 17 SDGs. So that's the first one, new knowledge creation. The key to solving some of our biggest challenges will come through university research. The second area is teaching. Obviously, universities are empowering the next generation of leaders to be sustainable citizens, sustainable-minded citizens, but also they're creating the skills that we need to drive forward the SDGs. Again, for example, if you say SDG 2, zero hunger, we look at the production of graduates into the fields of agriculture, for example. SDG 3, good health and well-being, we're looking at universities who are providing the skilled healthcare workers into the community, into society to help deliver those goals. So teaching and research, of course, the core areas of university activity, but we also look at two other really important aspects. One is stewardship. So our universities themselves, as large employers, is often, multi-million, sometimes multi-billion pound institutions. Are they managing their own affairs well? So their campus environments, for example, are they running their campuses in a sustainable way? But also, are they looking after their greatest resource, their people, in a way that is in accordance with the SDGs? So again, looking at qualities, for example, driving forward gender equality. So we look at, the proportion of female students, the proportion of women getting senior positions in the university. So stewardship is very important. They are large employers, big footprints, and how they manage their affairs there is something we look at. And then the final aspect is around what we call outreach, which is simply the universities making sure they connect with society through business collaborations, through government collaborations, and through work with NGOs. So they're not just sitting in a cliched ivory tower. They are actually making sure they are disseminating their knowledge, their good practice, collaborating on policy development, for example, with NGOs, making sure their research and innovation is getting out there, making a real difference on the ground. So they're the 4 areas, 4 theories of change that we base the rankings on. And then every single one of the SDGs has its own set of metrics based on those 4 areas. And we have literally 200 specific measures that we use across all the SDGs. So it's immensely complex but incredibly important to capture this aspect of a university's impact on the world. Well, look, I think there's a sense that traditional rankings play an important role, and Times Higher Education does produce the World University Rankings, including, of course, a ranking of business and economics programs. And these are a really important way for students to understand research excellence, prestige, but they are based very strongly on, research, the prestige of the scholarship, reputation. We survey 30,000 academics globally. So they're important to help students make a decision, but they are what I'd call scholarly impact. They're very scholarly in the sense of reassuring students that they're going to a prestigious school. And a lot of metrics in business school rankings, of course, focus on, will I get a good salary? Will I get a good job? And of course, they're very important elements for students making a choice, making an investment in their higher education. But I think these rankings really change the dial. They really focus in on what really matters to society as a whole. And of course, the SDGs are extraordinarily pressing. We are facing a climate crisis. We're facing global heating in a way that's, extremely alarming, an existential threat to our world. So we need to be really focused on the things that make a difference. Of course, the pandemic has shown us universities' role in helping us overcome such a global crisis through the creation of effective treatments, the rapid development and rollout of vaccines. They demonstrate universities have a huge role to play, not just in individuals' personal success in terms of their career. They have a huge role to play in terms of the wider societal benefits and tackling the world's biggest and often existential challenges. So I think these are of fundamental importance in understanding why universities are here and why they make a difference. And actually, we're facing, I think, a lot of backlash against universities globally. A lot of politicians saying, what are they for? What are they good for? Are they too expensive? Should we invest our taxpayers' money in other areas? Are they, bastions of privilege or just elite talking shops? And I think we do need to sort of start to help universities reframe themselves as saying, look, we are going to change the world. We are the key to the future prosperity and even safety of this world. So yeah, they are of fundamental importance as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, this ranking is absolutely unique. Nobody else is doing this. I think one of the main reasons nobody else is doing this is perhaps it is extremely difficult. There's a lot of rankings that are based on the things that are easy to measure. There's a bit of a phrase that says, are we measuring what counts or are we counting what's measured? So a lot of rankings fall back on the weakness that they just look at the things that actually can be measured, not the things that should be measured. And there's this idea that we measure what we treasure. We should be measuring the things that actually really matter to students, that matter to society, matter to university. So this is a unique ranking in the sense that I think it is hard to do. Times Higher Education has invested a huge amount of time and energy into creating this ranking. We have a data team of more than 20 full-time data specialists. We've been developing this for several years. It first was produced in 2019. So it is unique. But I think its uniqueness is obviously great for Times Higher Education. It's a resource that students are coming to in very large numbers. It's getting real global prominence now. So its uniqueness is probably quite good for Times Higher Education. But as far as the world's concerned, I think we need to continue to put pressure on universities, to hold universities to account, to give students the consumer power to make choices, to say we want to study at a university that is making a clear, demonstrable commitment to sustainability. So perhaps I would like to see more of this type of data being used, more of this type of ranking getting out there into the consumer space to support students. But really to lean on those universities to do better, to lean on those universities to demonstrate what they are doing and to be accountable for their contribution to the world. And I think there's no doubt that there are risks across society, that a lot of organizations like to claim they're green and make all sorts of claims to being green. I think this ranking is incredibly important in the sense that it holds them to account. It tests their commitments. So there's a very clear sense that actually in participating in this ranking, universities do have to provide reams of data. It's actually quite a burdensome process for the universities to go through. So they have to give us, not only are we extracting their research publications and examining the details of all the research they publish in fields relating to the SDGs, we're asking them to give us a huge amount of evidence of their activities, and to actually make sure that evidence is in the public domain. So we actually ask, do you have a commitment to X or Y or Z? We say, prove it, show us the evidence. And then we also say, could you make sure that evidence is actually in the public domain? We'll give you more credit for that, so that people can learn from one another and best practice gets disseminated. So what we're seeing in this ranking is a really fantastic movement of universities willing and ready to hold up to scrutiny, to stand up and be counted. And the growth of this ranking has been extraordinarily inspirational. We launched in 2019. There was a roughly 500 participants, which even then we were excited to see the level of engagement. And it is a voluntary process because it's an onerous process. But this year, 2022, we had more than 1,500 universities taking part. So hundreds of more universities are jumping on board, holding themselves to account every year. So I am really inspired by the commitment that's shown, the evidence that's provided to show universities are taking this seriously. And some of the great winners of this ranking, some of the leading institutions that have been at the top of the table over the years, Auckland, Manchester, this year Western Sydney University, it's really clear to us that they have put the SDGs at the very heart of their mission. They're embedded at the university at the very leadership level. They're cascading through all the undergraduate courses and the graduate courses. Sustainability is there, available to students to overtly learn about. They're focusing a lot of their research activities in these areas, and they're managing their own affairs very well. So it's inspirational, but it's interesting to note we have 1,500 participants. There are probably 20,000 universities in the world, and what we'd like to see is actually consumer pressure being applied, a bit of a fear of missing out element, and a student movement that says, we would like you to prove your commitment to the SDGs, to sustainability. So we hope to see that 1,500 growing each year, more and more universities stepping up to be counted and to be held accountable. But there's plenty of room for maneuver, and plenty of universities have not stepped up yet, and we will be continuing to invite them to take part, and I hope the student community will continue to ask these questions and ask that they do prove their commitment to delivering the SDGs. The great thing from a student's perspective, I think, is the rankings are so comprehensive. We do have an overall list, which is really a case of universities demonstrating a general commitment to SDGs, but that's made up of the sort of three best SDGs they submit to, as well as SDG 17, which is partnerships for the goals. So all universities ranked overall have shown strength in depth across a range of SDGs, and they've shown their commitment to SDG 17, partnerships for the goals, shown their commitment to collaborate, to work with organizations such as governments, such as businesses, to demonstrate their commitment. So it's a good guide to students to say, we are comfortable that these universities are doing their bit for the Sustainable Development Goals. But where I think it gets interesting is that you can really start to filter and look at individual areas. So, if you're thinking of just a more general career in business, we do have rankings specifically around industry, innovation and infrastructure. So you can say, okay, this university is committed to innovation, to spinning out its ideas into businesses, to entrepreneurialism. We can measure those elements. We have obviously a ranking on SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. So if your specialist interest is perhaps how cities work, smart cities, future cities, we have data there for you as well. If you're interested in climate action, if you're committed to green tech and green futures, we have that. So I think what's great is the fact that there are 18 rankings, 17 for each SDG, and an overall ranking. It does give students a huge amount of data to play with, and a huge amount of areas to filter for prioritization. And I would say if a student is still obviously keen on the sort of general metrics around excellence and prestige and reputation, you could almost cross-reference them against the more traditional rankings. Say, okay, well, we need to know, I do want to get a good salary. I do want to go to a school that's very well recognized by employers around the world. But that's not enough anymore. I want more than that. I want to know that I've got a potential future in a field that's relevant to a sustainable future. And then you can start to pour in. So yeah, my guide with students is always that rankings are always just a broad guide. They won't tell you everything you need to know. Nothing replaces your own research, poring over their websites, visiting if you can. But this is a wonderful way of starting to prioritize and starting to understand pockets of excellence and areas of niche strength. There's a good example, actually. The University of Newcastle in the United Kingdom is the #1 university overall in the UK, and they have particular strengths around civic engagement. So they are very proud to be one of these global universities that also are very embedded in their community in the northeast of England. And you can start to tease out some of that institutional ethos from this sort of work and look at those areas. In terms of careers as well, it's great if you think, I really do want a career, for example, in international relations and diplomacy. You can look at SDG 16, which is peace, justice, strong institutions. There's an extraordinary variety of data and a great diversity of universities. I think one of the things that's very exciting about this ranking is you'll see surprising names in there. It's not just the usual suspects, the traditional global elite. There's a real mix of institutions, some you may not have heard of, some that are less prestigious, younger, in the developing world, for example. So it's got a great diversity of opportunity for students. I would say an important message for students is use your consumer power. Universities want you, they want to recruit you, they need to compete for you. So use your this data, use your consumer power to put pressure on universities to show that they are going to make a commitment to SDGs, that they are committed to a sustainable future. And if your university that you're interested in is not part of this ranking, ask them to demonstrate to you what commitments they are making to SDGs. We don't want greenwashing, we want really hard evidence. And the way to make sure universities do stand up and hold themselves to account is through consumer power, student power. So get on the backs of the universities that want to recruit you. I think that's my key message to a student audience.